What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about how much lore will be included in Hogwarts Legacy. So another, I would say, more of a summary kind of video where we talk about more of a bigger issue, right? Now, there's a couple things with this. I am, again, working behind the scenes on a collaboration where we want to do, I won't mention with who, but when it ends up happening, we're going to talk somewhat along these lines, but I think go a little bit more in depth into a separate topic. So I kind of wanted to do this almost as a primer, because again, and as I've said multiple times, right, we've talked about a lot of different things that could potentially be in this game and not be in this game, and some things are gameplay related, right? Some are literally, okay, as a game, what are some things you would include in a game? You know what I mean? Different mechanics, different features. Even, I would say, the idea of talking to people and growing that kind of relationship out. I would even argue spells or skill trees or attributes, things like that. A lot of those things, they're not really exclusive to just Harry Potter, right? Or Hogwarts Legacy or the Wizarding World. They're in any game. Or any game kind of like this. You know what I mean? So for this one, though, I want to talk about the details, right? The actual knowledge that they possess as developers, and this game will have in it that, is kind of exclusive to it, okay? And so where I'm coming from this is, and it almost goes to, like, how knowledgeable will this game be about the Wizarding World? Now, like I said, a lot of the... And I will make this claim and this statement now, because I've said something along this lines, but I've never said it like this before. When we talk about being an animagus or fighting Dementors or whatever, like, pick a topic we've talked about, or pick any topic you can think about putting a game mechanic almost into this, or a mechanic into this game that's connected with some sort of knowledge or lore from Hogwarts Legacy. And I've always said, right, what have I always said? I've said, well, they can't put it all in. So if a lot of things are not included, I wouldn't say that's a lack of knowledge from these guys, or, a lack of just, they don't know what they're talking about. They didn't read the books. They didn't watch any movies. They didn't, all of kind of like the encyclopedias of the Wizarding World, they didn't look at it once, right? I don't think that'd be true. I think a lot of it would just come down to time. A lot of it would come down to you could only, and really all of it's time, right? Because you could say, well, they wanted to hit some things, and so they couldn't do other things. That's still, if you gave them 30 years, I'm sure they could pull off more than 4 or 5 years. You know what I mean? So that's one thing. But the rules... And rules meaning like the rules of the Wizarding World, and the things that we kind of already know about it, and that goes into, again, the history and the knowledge there. Those things, I will say as the statement, are unacceptable to get wrong. Now, I guess the question for this video is how much will they put on that? Now, we've heard from people that have, that developer that did the interview through, like, the college. Remember we talked about that interview a couple months ago? He had said, like, they are aware how important this is. They're gonna stick to what people know in terms of, like, they know the rules, and they're gonna stick, relatively close to them. They'll respect them, right? That's fine, and I'm not saying they need to acknowledge every single thing that happens. I would say my rules for Hogwarts Legacy are not very tight, and I'm not going to get mad over the smallest things. If they mess one thing up or two things up, and they're very small, not inconsequential, I don't think it's all that big of a deal. To be honest with you, it would almost be like, because I've made mistakes, right? I've said, oh, I don't know what this is or that is, and it's like, well, I have read the books, I have watched movies. Now, I guess, granted, I'm not making a video game based off of them. When you're doing that, and that's your entire life, right? That's your job. You wake up every single day to do that stuff. That's a little bit different. When there is no kind of pre-planning for me. I don't write a script, stuff like that. Again, that's very different for them. So I would argue that. I would argue, if these are medium-sized mistakes, if these are big mistakes, these are things that I think are, I was going to say it a different way, but I would say you could call them out for. Not in a threatening way, by the way, not in any kind of attacking way, but you just say, like, oh, okay, well, that's clearly an issue. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. To the question of, how deep would it go, I think it just has to stay with the rules. You know what I mean? I think it's like, well, the rules of the movies and the books, they are relatively the same. It's just the books have a lot more in it. If you only watch the movies, which, by the way, let me just throw this in there. I know there's some of you fools that think I've never read the books. That's very laughable, and I've said that before, and I guess there's no way of proving it besides me saying it. Unless you want me to take pictures of the collection of books that I have at, like, my parents' house of when I did read them, I guess I could do that. But, I have done both, okay, just to kind of clarify that. But they're relatively the same. It's just kind of a lack of things in the movie, and more of like a world building thing that the movie doesn't go into as much. I would say for any movie, really, but also for Harry Potter, it more or less leaves a lot of the non-blatant rules up to your imagination, where it's like, well, what happened before this? Well, it gives us some clues. You kind of just fill in the blanks. Or you know that, like, oh, well, maybe the books go into more detail. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the thing for the game. I mean, it does need to be knowledgeable. It does need to know what it's doing. And again, things like, well, like the biggest blatant things would be the years that it's taking place in, and what happens during those years, after those years, and before those years. You need, I would say, well, I don't think as a player you need to know. To be honest with you, I think this is going to be a game made for people that have watched the movies, have only watched the movies, have only read the books, have done both, and guess what? This will shock people, have done nothing. You can't, I know the Wizarding World is a big thing, okay, and a lot of people love it, and they'll always love it, and they've loved it for a long time, but pretty much any game, yes, you probably do start with that target demographic. I think every game under the sun does that, but you're very willing to, like, accept other people. You can't be off-putting, like, you can't say, like, oh, you've never watched the movie, get lost. Like absolutely not. You're not allowed to play our game. Nobody does that. And so hopefully there's no such, hopefully there's, that's gatekeeping, isn't it, right? In this way, hopefully there's no gatekeeping in that way about this game, okay? Again, the game needs to know what it's doing. I'm not saying you go in and it's 1870 and Dumbledore's there, where it's like, okay, he was, I believe, 92 is when he attended Hogwarts. So it's like, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. You just did this to kind of fit it in. See, those would be blatant things that I think you can't do. Same thing for events. Again, like if there's a certain event going on, and now failing to mention it in the game, I don't think is the worst thing in the world. Pretending like it never happened when it is happening, or it would have an impact on you, or it would have an impact. So say, now I'm making up an event. Say there was like some sort of wizard war, okay, in 1897, and you're playing the game like during that time, and say it impacted Hogwarts. If you don't mention it, maybe you can get away with it. Maybe if it doesn't impact Hogwarts that much. But, like, if it directly involves it and you pretend like it's not happening whatsoever, that's a problem. You know what I mean? And you could say, these are smaller issues, but this is the lore. This is the lore discussion. This is the lore issue that this game probably won't have. And I've said it before. I as of right now, I feel very confident in them. Now, could that fall apart rather quickly? Yes. If we start to see more trailers, more gameplay, more things said about the game where it's like, ooh, that's not true. So we'll have to see. But I have pretty solid confidence. I don't think it's gonna be like just lore stuffed down your throat like every 2.5 seconds. At the same time, though, I will argue, especially after just recently replaying Mass Effect, so I've played 1 through 3 in the Legendary Edition. I mean, there is so... They did... BioWare, what makes it so special is they made probably the most in-depth universe I'd say ever in a game. I would honestly argue that. Maybe you could say something for like The Witcher, or I don't know, so maybe like it has to be like a big RPG, I would say, that encapsulates multiple games, or just goes through it. But I mean, every conversation with species and like literally any dialogue, right? You're always getting something. You're getting something about the history of the universe. But again, the weird thing is, or I guess the tricky thing is, like, we never knew anything about Mass Effect. You know what I mean? So going into Mass Effect, you have to build what happened before. You have to build what's going on. You have to build these species. You have to build where they came from. You have to build the villain. You have to build why the villain's there. Oh, it's the Reapers. Oh, they've done this before. Oh, what's the history there? Oh, how do things work? Everything they need to explain to you because you've never been there before. The thing with Hogwarts Legacy is we have a lot of people. Now, again, not everybody, but a lot of people have been there. So how much lore, when you're talking and they're saying, oh, I like, they're mentioning fantastic beasts, or they're mentioning spells that are more like deep cut spells, right? Or they're mentioning classes that maybe people have never heard about. Like, these are all things that could very easily be put into conversations. I wonder how much of that's going to be in the game. Do they focus too heavily on that, or do they say, well, people know what we're doing, people know what Hogwarts, that's why we call, it's not called Harry Potter, it's also not called like the Wizarding World, it's literally called Hogwarts Legacy, and we all know what Hogwarts is, you know what I mean? So that's an interesting thing where maybe they feel they don't need to talk about the lore too much. Whereas again, a game like Mass Effect, you have to build everything, and they did. And like I said, I think BioWare is the best ones that have ever done it in that way. So, we'll have to see what happens. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this entire discussion? There'll always be more Hogwarts Legacy videos. I try to do them every 5 or so days. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Make sure, as always, you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on. Leave a like, would definitely help me out. If you guys want to follow me or subscribe or anything to all of my other things, I do have a Twitter, I have a second channel, we have Patreon, we have YouTube memberships. All of that stuff is in the description below if you guys want to check it out, okay? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.